Bill Kennett was a man used to making important decisions, but his last was shrouded in secrecy.
I went into the study one day and he said I'm just Googling suicide.
Harriet had been given just 2 months to live, and now she fears dying in pain.
I've thought about stockpiling medication.
Sandy has a rare and terminal disease, but she's finding dying legally isn't easy.
How many times have people said, over their lifetime, geez, if I ever get that sick, just go out and back and shoot me.
When we started this series, more than anything, we wanted to initiate a discussion amongst our viewers about assisted suicide and end-of-life options. We shared the stories of ordinary Canadians looking for a peaceful end to their lives, and you shared your stories via our website, social media, and the phone lines. Whatever your opinion about assisted suicide, one recurring theme was the pain and conflict you experienced watching helplessly as a loved one died.
At 6, my sister Ronnie became a victim of a devastating degenerative disease called Friedreich's ataxia. Despite her debilitating illness, she earned 2 degrees, wrote and published 2 books, raised a great family, and worked for the BC Coalition of the Disabled. Last November, faced with the solemn realization that she could no longer do any of the simplest things that gave her dignity and joy, my sister decided to take her own life. However, her attempt proved unsuccessful. Now she lies, filled with despair, alone in a darkened room. She is paralyzed, blind, legally deaf, virtually unable to speak, and in constant excruciating pain. Ronnie's situation is desperate. She prays for a legal means to end her torment, as well as for all those others like her who live in hopelessness.
I watched my father die from ALS. He was 64, and he had a plan in place. He was definitely planning to have a morphine cocktail, as far as I know. I don't know if he would have been able to do it himself. I think he was looking for somebody to help him with that process that could, I think because the fear of death was still there for him. He unfortunately died in the hospital with pneumonia, so he didn't need to go through that process. Anybody that is terminal should have the right to die with dignity.
I had to sit and watch my mother be eaten from the inside out with bowel cancer. In keeping with her wishes, she was at home and as comfortable as the drugs and the caregivers could make her. That said, the indignities she suffered, particularly in her last week of life, were heartbreaking. My mother had a very deep sense of faith and made her choice to die naturally. I guess for me it poses the question, if at the end stages of life we have a choice to live, then why shouldn't we have the choice to die?
My mother had a mild stroke in a Canadian care facility. The relative with power of attorney, along with a doctor who had never seen my mother before, decided she would have morphine only, although she was conscious, trying to speak, and indicating she wanted water. After 6 days without food or water, she died. As evidenced by my mother's story, we already have abuse of authority by some doctors to take away patient choice. Legalizing assisted suicide will give them even more power.
I would have been proud to assist my father to end his life. It would have been the ultimate act of love and compassion. When the cancer spread to his brain, he lost sight and his ability to walk. He begged the doctors to help bring the end quicker. Instead, he spent 3 weeks in a hospice where he had to be washed, spoon-fed his meals, and have his diapers changed. It was an absolute horror show for Dad, with no dignity. Eventually, he chose to starve himself to death. If I could have brought him the barbiturates and held the cup to his mouth, or if it meant injecting him with life-ending drugs, I would have done so. That would have been the ultimate, caring, compassionate, loving send-off.
In 2010, my mother was dying of cervical cancer. She could not eat and she was in great pain. Her palliative doctor prescribed her morphine and sent me home from the pharmacy with a bottle of liquid morphine. It came with a syringe and some instructions to administer it in small doses to manage pain. But I was not fooled at all. I knew that my mother's doctor had given her the gift of a pain-free end if my mother wanted that. I recall my own tears explaining to my mother what drinking just 1/3 of this bottle of morphine would do. My mother was very conflicted. She said, "I want to, but I can't do it alone. I would want you here with me holding my hand," but I didn't have the courage. My mother lived for one awful month after that, and then went to the hospital and died 30 hours later.
Some of the most moving responses we received came from viewers who spoke about hope and the role family and friends play in keeping it alive. Many of you shared your thoughts against assisted suicide and also addressed the ultimate question: whose choice is it to make?
I've had MS, multiple sclerosis, for 30 years. I went from being completely able-bodied athletic to being wheelchair dependent as I am today. It's been a long, tough journey. My heartache was so deep, my sorrow was so profound, that had I not been surrounded by people who loved me, I think I might have been open to suicide. If I had chosen suicide, it would not have affected just me. It never does. It would affect my wife, my children, my grandchildren. It would affect my community. It would affect my doctor, because I would ask her to stop being a healer and start being an executioner. And in a small way, it would affect my society by helping to entrench the notion that there is such a thing as a life that is unworth living.
Assisted suicide is an oxymoron. The consequences of this slippery slope will be serious. Any compassionate person will agree that those suffering severe pain, illness, or depression need our support. However, in a just democratic society, the common good must supersede all else, and taking another's life cannot be condoned in a just society.
I'm 48. They never thought I'd make it that far. I've got cerebral palsy. I had ulcerative colitis. Now I have no colon. I fell down a set of stairs, so I have no spleen. I've had kidney stones, and I only have one kidney. There was once when I did contemplate suicide. I even got out the knife. But life is precious. Life is far too much fun. And all of a sudden, assisted suicide becomes an acceptable medical treatment. People like myself who are living with disabilities, or indeed anyone who's in a lot of pain, like I am, may in fact find that their life is cut short. You know, I don't think there is any dignity in assisted suicide. None at all. There are too many good things in life to enjoy.
In 1998, I was diagnosed with AML leukemia. I had at most 3 months to live if I did not find a bone marrow transplant donor. Fortunately, my older brother Ben was a willing donor and a match. I then got a bone marrow transplant that saved my life. I went from 165 pounds down to almost 110. I was frail, thin, and in tremendous pain due to the chemotherapy. Yes, it's true that many times I thought of ending it, even right there in the hospital room if I could have. But I chose to fight on and live I did. And here I am 15 years later, working full-time, back to normal, considered cured. Life is a precious gift from God, and we have no right to decide when we want to end it.
When I was treated for cancer, severe pain prevented me from doing anything but subsist within myself, each moment feeling like a miserable eternity. Even though I did not consider assisted suicide at the time, I made inquiries when I was feeling better. I'm glad to be in remission, but the prolonged severe pain associated with cancer is not something I want to go through, especially if I know I will never again be well.
For the past 13 years, I've lived with Friedreich's ataxia, an incurable, untreatable, disabling neurological condition. As regards assisted suicide, I'd like there to be assistance if I needed it. However, I also believe that this is my life, my decision, to be taken with the help of those closest to me. If this isn't my decision to make, whose is it? Who has a greater right to decide this for me? And what presumption, what arrogance of theirs could justify it? I won't ask permission.